Then I'm going to share with you 5 pro vocal mixing tips. Hey, what's going on? Chris here from MIXDOWN Online. Now let me share with you those 5 pro vocal mixing tips that are quick and easy to use. Okay, for tip number 1, split your lead vocal track on 2 separate tracks. Now, this is not something that I do on all mixes, but that will happen in a song where I have a lot of difference as far as energy goes and vibe between the verse and the chorus, where the verse is a bit more upfront and quiet and the chorus way more energy going on. In this case, I tend to split that on 2 separate tracks so I can treat them differently. But I'm mainly going to keep the same processing on the 2 tracks, but only tweak a few of the plugins. EQ, for example, compression can be a bit slightly different between the 2. So this way I have a more consistent track. So they still sound the same, and it gives me the chance just to process them slightly differently from each other so I get a bit more control and a more consistent track in the end. So let me give you an example here. I'm going to have you listen to this verse.
J'ai tellement attendu que tu reviennes.
All right, close. It's a bit more quiet. Let's listen to the chorus.
J'ai tellement attendu que tu reviennes.
Okay, so you get the idea. The chorus is way higher. She's actually singing an octave higher in pitch, and she has way more energy, and she sings louder at the same time. So for me, it just made sense to split that on 2 separate tracks. I copied over the processing from the chorus to the verse track, because what I usually do is to mix the chorus before mixing the more quieter part of the song. So I tend to mix the part of the song where there's a lot of energy going on, and usually we're talking about the chorus. So, and then what I do, I just copy over the processing to the verse track, and I just tweak around some of the plugins that needs to be worked on to have a consistent track. And in this case, it was mainly EQ and compression. The rest was pretty much the same. So let me just show you what I have here as far as EQ goes. So this is my Fab Filter Pro Q3 that I have on the verse, and for the chorus, I have the same plugin, but there's a slight difference, especially on the high-mid part of the spectrum, where I have a dynamic EQ going on and a bit more cut compared to what I have on the verse. So this is an example of what I did here. Now, another quick example is the MV2, which is a compressor from Waves. Let me open the chorus one as well. So on the left, I have the, actually, you know what? There you go. Okay. Now, on the left, I have the verse, and on the right, the chorus. So the only difference that I have on this plugin is the low level that is quite higher on the verse track compared to the chorus track. So by having the lead vocal on 2 separate tracks, in this case, helps me a lot to speed up my workflow and to be more efficient when mixing my vocal. So there you go. So this is for tip number 1. Now let's jump to tip number 2. Mix at a low volume and in context of the mix. Something very important. In my case, what I usually do, I mix at low volume, regular volume, and sometimes at high volume just to check some stuff out. But in the most part, I mix at a regular volume. But mixing at a very low volume once in a while in the mix before making final decisions helps me a lot, to be honest. The way I do stuff, in this case, I bring my level way low, way down. And in this case, what happens is my vocal tend to pop out a bit more. It tends to even be a bit above the rest of the mix. And if that happens, if I have my lead vocal above the rest of the mix at a very low volume, I know that I'm in the right path. The balance is going to sound better. And also at a low volume, you're going to be able to hear the mid-range a bit better than at a high or regular volume. So this is why I tend to mix at some point in my mix. I will turn down the volume at a very low volume and listen and evaluate what I have here and make my final decisions from this point on. So it's a very good habit to take, to mix at a very low volume. And again, you can go back and forth between regular and low volume. So try it out. It's very easy to do. The only thing you need is a volume knob. That's simple. For tip number 3, add some special effects on some specific lines or words. This is going to bring your mix a bit more interesting if suited for the genre of music you're working on. That will work very well on pop music, rock, indie, and even folk music can benefit of that type of approach. Let me give you a quick example of what I did here on this, on the same mix. At the end of the second chorus, there's that one line that I wanted to emphasize. So I decided to just add a chorus doubling effect to this line, just to add a bit of a robotic type of sound. And this is what it sounds like.
Tu jettes le mal dans les flammes éternelles et guéris les nations.
Okay, that's simple. I just duplicated that track, only that part, that event, copied that event on another stereo track where I added a bunch of crazy effects to get that vibe and brought that same lead vocal down lower, and this is the type of effect that I ended up with, which is quite nice.
Tu jettes le mal dans les flammes éternelles et guéris les nations.
You can also do the same with a delay. If you want to add a very huge delay on one word, you can do so. I'm actually planning on doing a video on that later on adding some special effects on vocals. But there you go. So this is some stuff you can do. You can add saturation, you can add delays, chorus, or whatever, just to make your mix a bit more interesting. So this is tip number 3. Now for tip number 4, add saturation to your vocal track. That is also a very cool trick to do, just to enhance your vocals. Now, what saturation does to a signal is very simple. It's going to break out the signal and add harmonics to the signal, which is something that I like to do a lot on all sorts of sources. But for vocals, what I like to do is to use it in parallel. Now, I did a Mix Your Vocals series, video series here on YouTube. I'm going to leave the link on top, and one of the videos is about saturation. So you can check that video out if you want to have more details on using saturation for vocals. But just to give you a quick example, what I have here on my lead vocal, now I'm working on another mix. What I have here is the Quadraphase V2 from CUBASE from Stangberg, which is a stock plugin that you find in CUBASE. Now, I'm going to talk about this plugin next Friday on Plugin Friday. This is the plugin that I'm going to cover. I love working with this plugin. It's one of my favorite CUBASE stock plugin. So be patient and come back Friday to check out this video. Now, if you're watching this video in the future, I'm going to leave the link on top or at the bottom in the description down below if you want to check this video out. All right, so now let's check what we have here. I'm going to have you listen to that part without the saturation. So let's do that again, and I'm going to bring a bit of saturation. Now, it's going to be subtle. The goal is not necessarily to add distortion type of saturation. Sometimes that works very well, but this is going to be a case by case. Now, for this mix, I just wanted to add a bit of saturation blended with the dry signal. So let's check this out. All right, so it adds a bit more focus to the vocal sound, which is something that I like. It brights up the vocal at the same time. So I kind of like the effect by having that saturation in a subtle way. Now, saturation can be found in different forms. You can have it from an amp simulation plugin, a distortion plugin, which is basically a high-level saturation. At some point, we call that distortion. And you can also use a tape simulation plugin. That works pretty well. So there you go. So this is something that you can do just to bring your vocals a bit more upfront, less polish, to bring some imperfection to your signal, break out your signal a bit, which brings a very cool vibe to your sound. Try it out. Maybe not suitable for everything, but in a lot of cases, I like to work with saturation. Now for tip number 5, add a de-esser before using a compressor. Now a de-esser is very, very simple, is to control the S's and the T's of a sound, where we find in a lot of vocal recordings. Since the vocal techniques that we usually use these days is a more closer to the mic approach opposed to further away. The further away you're from the microphone, the less S's and T's are going to get in your sound, but we tend to close mic our vocal takes, and we can end up with a lot of S's on our vocal sound. And this is where the use of a de-esser comes to hand. So the best way, in my opinion, to work with a de-esser is to de-ess before you compress. So there's a bit more dynamic range for the de-esser to work and to detect all the S's, opposed to when you add your de-esser after the compression, where you have a bit less dynamic range going on. So in my case, what I like to do is to add a de-esser at the top of my vocal chain and one at the end if I need to. If my vocal needs a bit more de-essing, then I'm going to add one up at the end of the chain. But I'm going to start by adding one at the top of the chain before I hit the compressor. All right, guys, so there you go. Those are my 5 pro vocal mixing tips. I hope that was helpful. If you have any comments or questions, leave everything down below. And again, if you're new here on the channel, subscribe, click that notification bell so you don't miss anything. And for all of you, share and like this video. All right, guys, I'm going to see you next time. Ciao.